For the component controller and custom controllers, events can be defined with parameters of your choice. Any method of any other controller, including view and window controllers, can register to these events if this method is defined as an event handler method. These events are typically used to invoke processing in a view controller after processing in the component controller has been completed. This can be done when a method in the view controller subscribes to an event raised by the component controller. Using your design phase declarations, the Web Dynpro framework automatically performs the definition, triggering, and handling subscription to such events for you. You also have the additional option of dynamic event subscription at runtime. Be careful, if two or more methods subscribe to the same event, the order in which they are executed is undefined. Now, which other additional hook methods are in the different controllers? The component controller has the following additional methods: the WD-do before navigation, the WD-do post-processing, and the WD-do application state change. Methods, context elements, and events can be marked as part of the interface. These elements are then exposed to other components through the interface controller. I want to demonstrate now how to create events and methods. I want to create an event in the custom controller and create an event handler method in the component controller. In order to create the event handler method, the component controller has to know about the custom controller. That means I also have to define a usage. This is the custom controller I've created previously. Here I will now create an event. You see, an event can carry import parameters, which I can define here. And now let's save this. And now in my component controller, I want to have an event handler method. First of all, I have to add the custom controller as a use controller. This is always done on the Properties tab. You can do it on the Properties tab or here on the Context tab for controller usage, but I have no work to do on the context. So I will do it on the Properties tab. Hit this button, Create Controller Usage. Then it shows me all controllers which are right now visible to the component controller. You see, these are both of my windows, my custom controller, but my view controller is missing here because view controllers cannot be used. They are private. This is the right controller. Component use, that means it's empty here because the custom controller is from within my very same component. Only if I want to use controllers of other Web Dynpro components, I will have an entry here. So my custom controller methods and events and attributes, public attributes, are known now to the component controller, and now I can create an event handler method. Create a method, define it as event handler method, and then define to which event this method is to be registered. And you see here it shows only one event because in my whole Web Dynpro component there's only one event defined in the custom controller. Pick this event, hit enter and save. A view controller is a visual building block of a Web Dynpro component, and it is designed to handle all aspects of data display and user interaction, but not more. To enable the navigation between different Web Dynpro view controllers, special navigation events and navigation event handlers called navigation plugs have been created. Firing an outbound plug raises a navigation event. Based on the name of an outbound plug, a method fire outbound plug name PLG will be generated in the component's view controller. This method is only visible to the Web Dynpro framework, so it cannot be accessed from outside. An inbound plug is a navigation event handler that can be registered to a navigation request. For each inbound plug that you create, the Web Dynpro code generator will create a method handle, name of your inbound plug _ PLG. A static registration of an inbound plug to the navigation event raised by an outbound plug is called navigation link. Navigation links are not part of a view, but are defined in a window. You have seen this already in a previous lecture. Therefore, event registration can be defined differently in different windows. We have special hook methods. An action links a client-side event, for example, choosing a push button in a browser, to an event handler method defined in the corresponding view controller. When you define an action with the name action, an event handler method on action is automatically generated. If a view has to be replaced as a result of a client event, the related outbound plug can be fired in this action event handler method. View controllers therefore include special hook methods, which are wd_do before action, wd_do after action, wd_do modify view, and wd_do on context menu. In addition to the standard attributes that exist in all controllers like wd this and wd context, a view controller has a reference to the component controller of its own component. This attribute is called wd_comp_controller. This reference can be used to access functions of the component controller, for example, to call methods declared in the component controller. Remember that this attribute wd_comp_controller can only exist if the usage of the component controller is already declared in the view controller. I will demonstrate now how the different wd_do hook methods are executed through the Web Dynpro runtime. Therefore, I will run this Web Dynpro application. It is displaying all the events in the order they are processed. So we see first that there's one view which is processed. And before the view is processed, we see that the component controller's method wd_do_init, then the window method wd_do_init, and then only the view method wd_do_init is processed. When this is done, we end up in the Windows method handle default. Remember, this default is the Windows default inbound plug. So right now we are entering the application through this Windows default plug. Then the component controller's method wd_do before navigation is executed. Next, the start view's wd_do modify view, and last is always the component controller's wd_do post processing. Now I have a button here, display again, and I want you now to think 5 seconds about which events we will see when we display the same view again. So this is what's going to happen. The start view will be displayed again. So will we see component controller, window controller, and start view controller wd_do_init method again? We should not, because they will be executed only once. So we click it, and what we see now is that all the wd_do_init methods are skipped. Also, the Windows handle default method is skipped because we are already in the application, and we see a new method here that's called, in the start view, it's called wd_do before action. me clicking the window is triggering an action. Remember, an action is a client-side event. Web Dynpro has a method that's called WD before action, which will be triggered before the on action method. You see it listed here as a second method will be triggered. The WD before action method is a method that's designed mainly for user input validation. If the user input validation fails, then there's no need to continue with the method stack, and we can cancel the further execution of the WD hook methods. So we see the three methods: WD before action, on action, and WD do after action for cleanups. And then we end up again with the normal method calls: component controller WD do before navigation, and then start view WD do modify view. WD do modify view is a method that can be used for dynamic modification of the layout. And at last, component controllers method WD do post processing. When I hit the button again, now we will always see the same order of methods executed. So there's nothing special anymore. Now I will demo you the navigation between two views. So remember, in the previous demo there was start view only, and we saw how the different WD do hook methods are executed and in which order. Now you see, when you look at the screen here, scenario is slightly different. Start view is already displayed. This order of hook methods we are already familiar with. And now there's the button not display start view again, but display next view. So we navigated from one view to the other. So what will be the order of methods for displaying the second view? We can imagine that we don't run through the WD do init of component controller, window controller, and start view controller again, but that for the result view, a WD do init method call is necessary. We also see that, or saw that hitting a button triggers three methods related to the action behind the button. This is the WD do before action, the on action, and WD do after action method of the start view, which we here expect to be called. So let's hit this button. And we see here that we see start view WD before action first, as we assumed, then the on action, the after action. Then we saw already in the previous demo, the component controller WD do before navigation method is triggered now, because we are about to navigate from start view to the next view. And then it's time to instantiate the next view. And this is done with the result views method called WD do init. Then the result views handle method is called, something we see the first time. What is this handle? This handle is the inbound plug event handler. We are navigating from start view, outbound plug of start view, into the inbound plug event handler method of result view. This was not the same before. When we call the application first, then we don't navigate through an inbound plug of a view. We navigate only through the inbound plug of a window. And then we run through the WD do modify view of result view and components controller WD do post processing. Now you see there's another button now called back. Now what will happen when I hit the back button? This depends very much on the lifetime. And here I'm talking about the lifetime of my views. And here especially I'm talking about the lifetime of my start view. You see that right now only the second view or the next view is displayed, the start view is not displayed. And depending on the lifetime setting in the properties of the start view, this view still exists in the background or was already destroyed. If it was destroyed, I will again have to go through the WD init method of the start view. If it wasn't destroyed, then of course this method can be skipped. So let's check out the lifetime settings. There are the two options, which is framework controlled and when visible. Framework controlled means is a longer lifetime. When visible means it gets destroyed if not visible. So let's hit the back button. And we see the start view lifetime setting was framework controlled, which is the longer lifetime. So it wasn't destroyed once we navigated into the result view, which means we will not go through the WD to init method. And what we see is result view, we hit a button on the result view, WD to before action, on action, after action, what we already know. Then the component controller, WD to before navigation. And then because start view is still existing, we just go through the inbound plug event handler here shown with the handle method. And then WD to modify view and WD to post processing as usual. In the next demo, I want to show you the other lifetime, which is when visible. So remember, two lifetime settings, framework controlled and when visible. Framework controlled is the longer lifetime, keeping the view in the background, and when visible is the lifetime that means whenever the view is not visible anymore, it's not part of the current view assembly actually, then it gets destroyed. So I called the start view already. There's nothing special here. That's quite normal. We now navigate to the next view. Also something that we have already seen. And now the point is what happens when I hit the back button. Now don't get confused here. Now the user interface is German, but the functionality is the same. So right now I'm in the result view. We see here we handle the inbound plug event handler of the result view. And we're exiting the start view. This is something we haven't seen before, the exit call. The exit call is called before actually the start view here gets destroyed. So it's already a strong indicator that start view doesn't exist anymore, which means now me hitting the back button or here zurück button would mean I have to go through the WD to init of my start view again. So let's do this. And we see here, once we leave the result view and enter the start view, we again go to the WD to init method. Window controllers are similar to view controllers, but unlike view controllers, they don't have a UI, which means they don't have a layout. All views that are to be displayed when using a Web Dynpro application have to be embedded in the window that is referred to by the application or the calling component. The Web Dynpro window embeds all views to be displayed. If defined statically, the navigation links defining the possible view assemblies are embedded in the Web Dynpro window. Each Web Dynpro window contains outbound plugs and inbound plugs. Just like views. You can use the plugs to set up cross-component navigation. To expose the plugs to the component interface, select the interface property for each plug. These plugs are then part of the related interface view. If the usage of the component controller is declared, the window controller contains the additional attribute WD comp controller, which we have already seen in the view controller. This attribute allows also to access component controller functionality. Window controllers also have special hook methods. This is the WD on open and the WD on close method.